Greetings all, and welcome to the final segment of A Traveler's Guide 2 for Tallon IV. And today, we will be concluding our look at the planet with this final segment, A Traveler's Guide to the Phazon Mines and the Impact Crater. The Phazon Mines are artificial in nature and, as the name states, were the primary locations from which the space pirates were mining Phazon out of the crust of Tallon IV. With its operations overseen by Facility Command, the mine was the most heavily guarded area in the entire planet, and at the time it was active, had the highest number of space pirate troopers, their variations, and the most dangerous space pirate experiments. The caverns that have been created as a result of the space pirates digging are long and treacherous, with artificial metal wires in place covering the floors and supporting nearly every visible structure both in and out of the facility. The only open area of note is the main quarry, where a large Phazon crane is stationed, and even then, the only thing that can really be seen is the sky, which has been covered a shady pink hue in this part of the planet as a result of pollution from space pirate mining equipment. The turret variations and trooper pirates that hid in the research stations and lower mines were trouble enough for the hunter in exploring the area, but she had much bigger fish to worry about, as she was also forced to confront some elite pirates the space pirates had been experimenting on, and even Metroids that they had been keeping in the facility for testing and analysis, eventually coming face to face with the ultimate project, the Omega Pirates. While this facility is now all but out of operation entirely, it can still be explored by those curious to see what is left inside there, but it may or may not have a stray pirate or two inside, and thus may be one of the few places not worth visiting if one just casually wants to explore the landscape of Tallon IV. As far as can be spoken on previously covered organisms, the Phazon Mines were once home to gliders, scatterbombus, burrowers, puffers, space pirate troopers, shadow pirates, and Tallon hunter metroids, with Serenine also being common in its lowest depths. The Mega Turret was a modification made to the basic auto defense turret that made them far more efficient at their job. Frustrated over the weak power and durability of the traditional turret, space pirates in the Phazon Mines of Tallon IV took modified heavy cannons and added energy shielding to them in order to make a substitute for the weaker turret models. These enhanced weapons can take much more punishment than the auto defense turret, have a much stronger energy shot, and can fire much more rapidly, making them efficient point-blank defense weapons. However, the turrets can still be deactivated if there's a control console nearby, and they will still go out of control if electricity damages them too much, which may be more of a curse than a blessing as a result of their improved offensive capabilities. As such, while still a notable improvement over the base design, it can't really do any more than what the original model could, and thus is assigned to threat level Beta. The Cloak Drone was an experimental drone developed in the Phazon Mines by the space pirates as a guard for the most powerful ballistic weapons, especially ones that could match the same destructive power as a power bomb. This drone model is identical to the nearby security drone in terms of its behavior and attacks, but it lacks the visor scrambling technology of its lesser brethren. Instead, this machine is equipped with the same type of cloaking field that is used by shadow pirates in Tallon IV, and effectively renders it invisible to sight in most forms. The only thing that can be seen is the glow given off by its thrusters. In addition, the cloak drone possesses slightly stronger armor than its normal variant, and thus can be a difficult target to inflict substantial damage on, but otherwise is unable to do much more in combat than its normal counterpart. It is thus matched with them in threat level Gamma, but it's also a rare model that's unlikely for explorers to ever come across unless they are someplace where they really don't belong. Fission Metroids are the last strict evolution of Talon Metroids on the homeworld, but while they might look similar to the Talon Brethren, they are true abominations that have been so heavily mutated by the effects of Phazon radiation that they are unable to maintain a stable form for long. Phazon radiates huge concentrations of beta rays naturally, and as a result, infant Talon Metroids that are exposed to it at a young age can mutate and gain their adult powers very quickly. However, if they are exposed to radiation for too long, or are exposed to highly lethal red Phazon, their bodies will mutate and gain a dull silver appearance with blue-gray nuclei. In this form, these creatures are still able to use their normal powers to attack and drain the life energy of their prey, but their cellular structure is rendered highly unstable. As a result, these monsters can either die from coming into contact with solidified Phazon, or, more often than not, will undergo asexual reproduction after sustaining minor damage, and therefore produce two completely healthy and fresh Metroids in the process. However, these creatures do not retain the weaknesses of the cold in most cases because, due to the chaotic nature of Phazon, the split has the effect of granting these new fission Metroid offspring immunity to all but one specific type of beam weapon. There are currently 4 types that are known. Yellow specimens are weak to the power beam and light energy, purple specimens are weak to the wave beam and electrical energy, white specimens are weak to the ice beam and extreme cold, and red specimens are weak to the space pirate plasma beam and extreme heat. Because they tend to attack in pairs, fighting against these mutated monsters can be a serious pain, so eliminating them with a powerful explosive instead is usually the better option than trying to kill them normally. If backed into a corner with no way out, however, it is also possible to let these creatures simply feed off an individual's energy, as they will violently explode if they absorb too much energy as a result of their unstable structure, though the chances of this working are still low enough to be a poor choice for a survival tactic. All in all, these mutant Metroids are an absolute terror to deal with, and Science Team doesn't want to go anywhere near them, and the same should be said of Explorers. Even if they still match other types of Metroids on Tallon IV with an assignment to threat level Gamma, they can be a serious danger to deal with in pairs or more, and thus are worth avoiding at all costs, if at all possible. Now, adding to the troop roster for the space pirate forces that existed in the Phazon Mines at the peak operation, Beam Trooper Pirates were a special class of space pirates used in Tallon IV, equipped with the most advanced beam weaponry that the space pirates had available at the time. With strange colored armor that extended their head shape into a conical form and bladed sides that are fused into the armor of the left arm, these space pirates were much more dangerous than normal space pirates because, as striking as it may seem, they were equipped with the same beam weapons available to the Hunter on Tallon IV. Or at least to an extent. At that point in time, the space pirates had successfully replicated the powers of the traditional beam weapons possessed by the Hunter using stolen Chozo upgrades. This advanced technology was applied to the Beam Trooper pirates in order to give them a massive boost in power, but these new beam weapons were far from perfect. While they might have been able to reproduce the damaging power and part of the firing rate of the Chozo beam weapons, they were unable to replicate their valuable secondary effects. More importantly though, a fatal flaw in the construction of these artificial weapon variants actually made the armor of the Beam Trooper pirates susceptible to damage from their own beam weapons. This does still make them a threat though, as the armor allows them to take more punishment than normal space pirates and makes them completely immune to all other types of weaponry, enabling only a single beam type and its associated charge combo able to actually damage them. These pirates also rarely travel alone, usually found in semi-large groups, though they usually only travel with Beam Trooper pirates with the same beam affinity and thus can be targeted accordingly. There are four main types of Beam Trooper pirate: Power Troopers, which are only weak to the Power Beam and the Super Missile; Wave Troopers, which are only weak to the Wave Beam and the Wave Buster; Ice Troopers, which are only weak to the Ice Beam and the Ice Spreader; and Plasma Troopers, which are only weak to the Space Pirate Plasma Beam and the Flamethrower. As a whole though, the stronger armor suits and improved weapons, as impressive as they were, really did not prove to be the significant power upgrade that was desperately needed to actually overcome the Hunter, despite Science Team's best efforts. Hey, you asked me to give a fair assessment of your materials and research, so don't blame me if I point out the flaws. That being said, I still have to assign them to threat level Gamma, but I will make note that they are clearly a cut above the normal soldier, and had to be approached with specific types of weaponry in order to actually target their very weaknesses and dispatch them. Running away was not an option. Elite pirates were the result of the space pirates' first attempt at using Phazon in order to breed superior soldiers for their armies, and as one might expect, the results were promising, but simply not up to par for what they were expecting. These monsters tower over the lesser brethren in both size and power, and able to withstand an incredible amount of punishment before dying. Moreover, they are equipped with a number of powerful weapon systems, including a wavequake generator for their generation of massive energy shockwaves from pounding the ground, wrist bayonets for close quarters combat, and an energy siphoning system installed on the left wrist that allows them to absorb the shots from beam weapons when active. This absorbed energy can then be transferred straight into the plasma artillery cannons that are attached to the upper left shoulder, which can then fire globular projectiles that explode violently upon hitting the target on the ground, making long-distance combat an unwise move in most cases. The incredible power these creatures possess more than makes them a successful bioweapons project, but even then they are still quite slow-moving, so the sluggish behavior can be used to dodge their attacks easily and slowly chip away at their energy until they are dead. Moreover, their shoulder-mounted cannons can easily be locked onto a thermal visor technology and destroyed with concussive weaponry, limiting their combat options and weakening their composure to the point of being readily stunned from charged beam shots. It is further known that these creatures were only rendered successful experiments after the isolation of the Phazon strain Vertigo, as all elite pirates before them had degenerated brain tissue in combination with increased muscle mass, and most of them had psychotic breakdowns as juveniles and would kill anything that entered their zone of perception. While it seems that the few that are left in their stasis pods were not likely to escape the pods anytime soon, if at all, the danger they would otherwise pose is immense and not something that should be taken lightly at all. For this, I have to assign them to threat level Delta, as while they might just seem like massive bulky troopers to the untrained eye, the immense power they have means that only the most heavily armored of individuals could handle them, and even then, only with extreme firepower to put them down quickly. The Phazon Elite were a very limited set of elite pirates that were substantially enhanced in power and durability by the infusion of Phazon directly into the bodily structure. The resultant monsters were just as large as their elite brethren, but their entire body became misshapen and warped as a result of this radical mutation process, exposing some of the rib structure and insides and covering the upper body with abnormal plates of Phazon that deformed it to make them look like a freak with an over-enlarged left shoulder and twisted face. These monsters cannot wield any type of artillery cannon on their bodies as a result of their misshapen form, but they do not seem to mind this, as they can still use their wrist bayonets and wavequake generators to inflict massive damage against anything that dares to get near them, and still possess the same energy siphoning systems that can make them immune to beam weapons when active. These monsters are incredibly violent and possess a significantly lower lifespan than normal elite brethren, but this seems to have mattered little to the space pirates, as their incredible power proved to be more than what nearly any other type of pirate could demonstrate. So much in fact that they had to be stored in special storage containers made with bendezium, which only extremely powerful explosives like a power bomb can readily break. Since they were essentially just a stronger variation of elite pirates in the forms of behavior, they are also to be assigned a threat level Delta here, and thus should be avoided at all if possible if one is somehow awakened and released from its stasis pod. The Omega Pirate was the prize of the space pirate forces on Tallon IV, and is more than justifiably labeled as the most powerful space pirate to ever live outside of Ridley. Originally codenamed Elite Pirate Upsilon, the Omega Pirate was just an ordinary elite pirate before it started to display an extreme hunger for Phazon and the ability to maintain a stable physical and mental state with no loss in intelligence regardless of how much of the substance is actually consumed. Intrigued by this, the space pirates nurtured its extreme growth into a titan more than 3 times the size of a normal space pirate. This monster became capable of using rounded Phazon crystals in its body armor as a source of power for all of its defensive shielding and weapons. As long as it possessed these crystal nodules on its shoulders and upper thighs, the Omega Pirate could heal any surface damage dealt to it and was thus effectively indestructible. It was armed with a wavequake generator, wrist bayonet, and plasma incendiary launcher similar to what was possessed by normal elite pirates. This monster also possessed deceptive intelligence and the capacity to even speak, communicating with beam trooper pirates and ordering them to help it even though it had no qualms about killing its help if they got in the way of its attacks. Sustaining fire to the Phazon crystals that powered the creature's artificial and biological systems would eventually destroy them, and once all 4 were gone, it forced the Omega Pirates to enter one of 3 changing ports in the elite quarters areas of the Phazon Mines. And once it got into position, it could use these ports to draw Phazon from massive hidden reserves in the ground, allowing it to regenerate its power source and restore its outer tissue to fully functioning order. This was a problem for the creature, however, as without its power source, its body was completely vulnerable to attack. To make up for this, the Omega Pirate was equipped with a Chameleon Manta cloaking shield that allowed it to completely hide its body and try to fully regenerate its Phazon-infused armor. This did not make it any less vulnerable, however, and the bright Phazon veins that supplied the substance to all parts of its body could be seen with X-ray visor technology. Concentrated fire could stun the creature and force it into a painful retreat, but it would quickly resurface at another charging port and continue to do so until it gained enough energy to fully repair its outer body. When the Omega Pirate was damaged, it would also call forth beam trooper pirates to assist it in battle, making it difficult to find a moment to rest and shortening the time available to target the beast when it was weak. In short, the Omega Pirate was a devastating monster that more than showed what the space pirates were capable of actually doing in the early days of Phazon experimentation. And even though the entity was successfully defeated by the Hunter in her initial exploration of the mines, it nonetheless serves as a pinnacle point for the initial research of science team and their efforts, and locks in with an assignment threat level of Epsilon. A truly terrifying testament to the extremes the space pirates have been willing to go to for the sake of universal domination. Before we head to the last area to cover in the examination of Tallon IV, a special mention needs to be given to a certain entity not native to Tallon IV that proved to be a severe challenge to the Hunter in her attempts to clear the planet of its Phazon corruption. Gentlemen, roll the music. Ridley holds the coveted title of perhaps being the most powerful space pirate to ever live, but he in turn is also the sole reason why the space pirates were ultimately defeated in the destruction of Zebes. Ridley's exact species is unknown, but to a confederation of species all hell-bent taking over the galaxy through brute force and destruction, it can be assumed that all that mattered to them was his thirst for blood and his incredible tactical mind. Though he is often portrayed as nothing more than a brutish monster by humans, Ridley was actually an incredibly intelligent military commander that helped the space pirates become a galactic force during its early years, and ultimately proved to be a powerhouse linchpin that would keep the space pirates together as a single force over the years. While the Hunter was seemingly able to kill Ridley in the very first encounter within the depths of Zebes during a so-called Zero mission, Ridley, though defeated, was far from dead. On orders from the new High Command, Ridley's remains, identified as Geoform 187, were taken to the frigate Orphean, and he was resuscitated after being painfully rebuilt with cybernetic modules, armor plating, and other metagenetic improvements pioneered and tested in the Ridley robot on Zebes, ultimately reawakening about a year after his defeat as the monstrous cyborg Meta Ridley, and with all of his memories intact. Ridley was to be kept sedated constantly to ensure they did not suddenly break off and leave for parts unknown until they were sure that all of his new weapon and armor systems were actually functional, as High Command still had plans to reuse him as the mainstay of the frigate's space-powered security forces. But the final rounds of testing could not occur before the frigate suffered a containment breach, and the parasites and parasite queens they had been experimenting on broke free and tore the frigate apart, leading them to send out a distress signal that was picked up by the Hunter. As he defeated the parasite queen and the frigate started to self-destruct, she entered Biotech Research Area 2, where the space pirates had housed the sleeping monster, and he was awakened by the sounds of the frigate coming down on him due to the lack of a timed sedative application. Upon seeing his old nemesis once again, Med Ridley flew into a rage and forcefully ripped off all of his attached medical equipment, soaring high into the air and leaving for the nearby planet of Tallon IV to recoup and devise a new plan to kill the bounty hunter as she pursued him to the only habitable section of the planet left. Ridley apparently no longer needed any oxygen in order to survive, and this was to be but the first new power that he would come to love in this new form. Most of the time the Hunter spent exploring Tallon IV, Med Ridley stayed hidden in the shadows, waiting for the perfect opportunity to attack her, even failing to help his fellow space pirates when the Glacier 1 base of Andrada drifts and the Phazon Mines were attacked and ultimately eradicated of their presence. Only when she had collected all of the chosen artifacts and had opened the cipher sealing off the impact crater did Med Ridley attack, using his new powers to partially destroy the cipher and prevent it from working anymore, a fit of revenge that the Hunter read on his mind all too well. In this new and improved form, Med Ridley's body was heavily armored and completely impervious to all forms of weaponry. The only exception was an unhealed wound in his chest, where the plating was made thinner to allow for more blood flow to the wound so it would heal faster. His energy-based wings gave him greater agility in the air than ever before, and aside from allowing Med Ridley to float through the void of space in controlled flight, they granted him the high ground that he valued for much of his battle with his nemesis. In addition to his traditional tail and claw-based attacks, the space pirates had further equipped Med Ridley with a kinetic breath weapon that turned his fiery breath into a massive beam of superheated plasma, a Meson bomb launcher to enable him to carpet bomb vast areas of land with explosives strong enough to destroy stone, an ultra-thermal flame strike projector that allowed him to slam the ground below him to create massive shockwaves of fire, and a multi-missile system perfect for targeting and destroying moving enemies. Overall, Med Ridley was far more powerful and swifter than he had ever been before, and would have been the end of the Hunter if it had not been for his incomplete state. She was able to target and damage the thin plating covering his heart to severely damage it, creating electrical feedback in his metallic frame that ultimately damaged and disabled his wings, forcing him to fight her on the ground. Though his energy-based weapons and physical attacks with his tail and full-body tackles proved to be even more of a threat in close quarters, and he wouldn't reveal his weakness unless stunned from repeated damage to his vulnerable mouth, the Hunter was able to friendly destroy the plane protecting his heart and dealt significant damage to the organ, critically wounding Med Ridley. As Med Ridley backed off towards the edge of the area, Choso's statue sentry stationed at the top of the artifact temple fired a series of powerful lasers straight at Ridley's exposed heart out of anger for him destroying part of the structure. The energy overload was too much for him and he was forced off the edge of the temple's cliff, exploding in a ray of destruction and seemingly being destroyed once more. Though history has shown us that this is not the case for too long. Overall, in this state, Med Ridley was a terrifying force to behold and easily one of the strongest forms this entity has ever taken, so a classification between threat level Epsilon is more than warranted, and serves as yet another testament to the ingenuity of science team and the space pirates as a whole in making the most powerful weapons they can out of literally any type of life form. Though this final area has completely collapsed now and is no longer accessible, let's wrap up this report and talk about the impact crater, the location where Tallon IV was originally struck by a Leviathan, a place not for the faint of mind and especially body, as a course with rare red Phazon that was so potent that even the Hunter's temporary Phazon suit was not enough to render her immune to its damaging effects. With Lumic-X swarms and fission metroids before her, the Hunter climbed through the interior of the crater up and around the remnants of the Leviathan, so badly damaged and twisted from the impact that it was almost unrecognizable, in an attempt to find and destroy the source of the Phazon on the planet, and managed to encounter a few interesting entities not found elsewhere on Tallon IV. The protozoan of Tallon IV is an exceptionally large single-celled organism that has only been observed in the impact crater, which subsequently collapsed after the death of Metroid Prime. Even so, while they were present, these creatures could be found swimming in an unknown liquid of some sort behind transparent membranes on the walls of the Leviathan's interior. It is surmised that they are able to reach their normal size through exposure to Phazon, though it does not seem to have been enough to turn them into a dangerous monster. It is a shame that samples of these creatures were not able to be taken, but they nonetheless pose an interesting example of how Phazon may or may not radically affect the bodies and powers of creatures exposed to it. While they were around on Tallon IV, Lumic-X were a minor nuisance at best, but are nonetheless seen as dangerous creatures as a result of their connection to Phazon. These reptiles have only been observed in the impact crater of Tallon IV, and while they might have been able to survive in the deepest pits of the impact crater structure, though they could still be killed by direct contact with red Phazon, they all died out with the destruction of Phase and have not been seen on the planet since, most likely because their life functions have become biologically devoted to processing the toxic substance. Lumigeks possess see-through skin as a result of their exposure to Phazon radiation, and rely on the substance for food, so much in fact that their bodies radiate the substance everywhere they go, and thus may have been responsible for the spread of much of the Phazon that once existed outside the impact crater on Tallon IV. Aside from the radiation, however, these creatures are effectively harmless, and have been observed to feed on small insects when outside a major source of Phazon, though this is a rare enough occurrence on its own relative to just seeing these beasts out in the open. Because the small bodies really have no way of hurting others aside through direct contact, these creatures tend to travel around in fairly large swarms, and the hopes of at least part of the swarm will survive to reproduce after an attack from a major predator. This behavior seems to be a product of early generations before Phazon corruption though, as the mutated variety observed in Tallon IV simply has too much Phazon in its systems to make it safely edible. A single shot is all that's needed to kill Lumigek, but fast-firing weapons are recommended highly simply because of the sheer numbers they travel in and the tendency to pop out in relatively crowded areas. Still, compared to most of the dangerous organisms that actually call the pit home, these creatures were easily the least dangerous denizens of it, and more than deserve a place in threat level alpha, being nothing for most to have to worry about if they at least have decent anti-radiation gear. Metroid Prime is one of the most powerful Metroids to ever live, and its story of destruction and evolution is so profound that it was even seen to exist in the future by the Chozo on Tallon IV long before its birth, being witnessed as the worm that would feed and grow in the poisoned womb of the Leviathan that had spread the great poison across the planet. When the Leviathan first impacted Tallon IV, it was not that long before Phazon started to leak out through the ground and started to affect the life forms on the planet, killing many and mutating others into frightening abominations like Flagra. Even the Chozo were not immune to its effects, as some became known as the Turned in death, the minds and spirits twisted into madness by the corrupting effects of Phazon radiation and forced to maintain an existence as Chozo ghosts on a physical plane of existence. The great poison threatened to encapsulate the entire world, and the Chozo did not have the power to destroy it, but they prophesied that the true evil had yet to come, and that there was an even greater monster that would come to live in the starborn abomination and help to spread its influence until it reached the entirety of the planet. They built the artifact temple, or the cradle as they called it, to seal the great poison away as much as they could and slow its progressive choking of their beloved home. With one of their kind was left in the prophecy of light depicting a vision of a coming newborn that would save the world in the future, the Chozo of Tallon IV left the planet and took off to parts unknown. 50 years after the Leviathan hit their planet, space-powered explorers on the planet discovered a toxic substance that they call Phazon. This was the great poison that had been spoken of in Chozo lore, and what had killed and mutated much life that existed on the planet. The space pirates, eager to test the effects of the substance, found it to be a potent mutagen and immediately began experimenting with it to create bioweapons that they could use against their enemies, with both spectacular and terrible failures that ultimately led to the destruction of the frigate Orphean and the involvement of the Hunter upon answering the ship's distress signal. Though the space pirates did not realize it at the time and may never have, one of the Talon Metroids they had taken from the planet and experimented on got loose from their care and came into contact with so much Phazon that it somehow managed to mutate into most likely the very first Phazon Metroid to ever exist. Detecting even more of the delicious substance in a pit far below the surface of the planet, the creature used its characteristic phasing ability to move straight through the cipher barrier that had been put in place by the Chozo, the 12 artifacts being the only keys that could normally allow anyone access to the pits of the impact crater. Once inside, the monster got even luckier, as it was not just any Leviathan, but a rare, potent variation containing red Phazon, a substance that was 86% more powerful than normal blue Phazon. Further mutation led the creature to evolve into a hopping Metroid, but at that point, it lost its ability to phase and was stuck inside the impact crater. With nothing left to do but feed, the creature did just that, and as its exposure to red Phazon continued, its form grew and mutated further, until it ultimately went so far as to devour the Phazon core of the Leviathan and gained its power to create and radiate Phazon, finally becoming the nightmarish abomination known as Metroid Prime. The worm, prophesied by the Chozo, had become an adult and the guardian of the Leviathan, and its power surpassed that of almost every other Metroid that ever been and ever would come to exist in the future. In terms of appearances, Metroid Prime looked nothing like a normal Metroid, possessing 3 massive legs used for locomotion, as well as 2 pairs of secondary limbs that used for grasping objects and holding onto walls. Its body was teardrop-shaped, much more so than even a hopping Metroid, and its face is mostly covered by a series of armored plates tuned to specific energy types. Its sole pair of glowing red eyes did not look like they belonged on a Metroid of any type, and its size was so immense that it dwarfed its brethren, only being smaller than a Queen Metroid in terms of overall body mass. While most of its body was encased in an exoskeleton so durable that not even high explosives like power bombs could put a dent in it, its face was unshielded in order for it to feed freely, making it the only part of the creature that was vulnerable to attack. And even then, there was a catch. For reasons that are still unknown, perhaps due to the extreme mutation brought forth by the consumption of Leviathan's core, the creature could create defensive energy screens over its face to protect itself from damage. The only problem was that a genetic flaw rendered these screens weak to specific types of beam weaponry, making it possible for the hunter to actually damage it with the right weapons. In terms of offense, Metroid Prime had developed a number of potent biological and semi-mechanical weapon systems, which include an ultra-frigid ground-based beam similar to that used by Thardos to freeze its prey in its tracks, an organic missile system that allows it to fire projectiles with not only explosive power, but even infused with poison, depending upon the beam weakness it is currently possessing. A snare beam with which to grab prey from afar and bring them close to its mouthparts so it could quickly devour them. And a particle wave generator they could use to create energy orbs that homed in on a target with elemental attributes that matched the defensive screen the creature currently had equipped. Not to mention a powerful energy laser fired from its mouthparts, whose secondary properties were able to be related to its currently equipped defensive screen. Just as with the hunter's own arsenal, the creature's damage screens added secondary effects to some of its attacks, like static paralysis and visor scrambling, freezing and setting targets on fire. If severely damaged, the creature would also not be afraid to close its face shield before charging forcefully at its target, likely crushing anything that couldn't get out of the way. While the hunter faced a grueling battle with this monster and had to critically injure it many times in order to keep it at bay, the two of them slowly crushing farther and farther down into the impact crater, she was eventually able to overpower the titanic fiend and cause it to collapse into the deepest pit of the crater. As the hunter jumped in to survey the damage, she spotted the creature's lifeless body crumpled up in a corner of the small chamber, only to see a different entity emerge from the husk altogether. She had so severely damaged the creature's exoskeleton that it was unusable, forcing the monster's Phazon essence to mutate and take on a life of its own as the true core of Metroid Prime. In this form, Metroid Prime much more resembled an actual Metroid, though its form was still distinctly different, with its bluish translucent body possessing 6 tentacles, a trio of mutated fused nuclei, and a face with eyes that seemed uncomfortably human in appearance. In its core form, this monster lost most of its power, and its only attack, aside from slamming its head into the hunter at close range, was the ability to create powerful bursts of energy that radiate and circle outwards from Metroid Prime like shockwaves. While its attacks were highly restricted, the beast's incredible exposure to Phazon radiation had energized its core essence so much that it had been rendered completely and utterly invulnerable to all forms of weaponry. Since its powers were limited offensively, the creature used its Phazon charged body to give birth to different types of Metroids for assistance in battle, creating them from pools of highly concentrated Phazon generated from the tips of its tentacles. It was this move that ultimately cost the creature its life, however, as it unwittingly had given the hunter a pure enough source of Phazon for her Phazon suit to utilize it and pump into her arm cannon. As such, whenever she stepped into one of these pools, she was given the temporary ability to focus the energy into her body and utilize the devastating Phazon beam, which ripped right through the monster's body and dealt critical damage to it in the process. Because, and not despite, of all the Phazon it had consumed, the creature had no natural defense against Phazon as a weapon, and while it shifted its energy signature several times to remain viewable only through select visor types and created a host of minions for the hunter to face, including Tallon, Hunter, and Fission Metroids, they were all instantly killed by the power of the Phazon beam, and the hunter was able to weaken the core of Metroid Prime enough to cause it to enter a state of total molecular destabilization. With its body destabilizing from Phazon overload, the monster changes form one last time, this time into a primal state of complete simplicity, looking like a giant amoeba with a massive series of nuclei in the center of its body. It flung tentacle-like extensions of its body at the hunter and attempted to absorb her in order to stabilize its form, but instead it lost its grip and merely stripped the corrupted Phazon suit off of her, reverting her back to her gravity suit form. This excess amount of Phazon was too much for the creature and it promptly exploded, with the hunter just barely being able to get out in time before its death, creating an explosive force so great that it brought the entire artifact temple to the ground with it, shattering the ancient homage made by the race that had saved the hunter's life and made her into the warrior she was. This would bring an end to the Phazon corruption on Tallon IV, and essentially purge it almost entirely of the Great Poison, but the full consequences of her actions would not be realized until later, when she traveled to Aether to search for the missing GFS tier. Though Metroid Prime may have died, its essence lived on in a bubbling pool of Phazon left in the heart of the impact crater. Using the stolen Phazon suit and an incomplete segment of the hunter's own DNA, the beast created a new form for itself and was reborn from the ashes of destruction. Metroid Prime had indeed died, but only for it to be resurrected as the galactic scourge that would come to be known as Dark Samus, aka the Dark Hunter, an entity that would nearly bring the Galactic Federation and many planets to the brink of destruction in the future. With all that said, it can be seen this entity was a threat so far above most others that I have to give it a rare rating of threat level, the worm feeds. It may have only been a one-off of some sort for the hunter, but the sheer power that it could wield, not to mention that it would eventually be revived into a more dangerous entity in the future, more than testifies that this creature was among the worst of scourges that the known universe has ever seen, and it is hoped that nothing of its sort is ever seen to emerge in the cosmos again. There is no way to really undersell the statement that the Phazon Mines and impact crater of Tallon IV are very unsafe for explorers of a traditional kind to travel through and should generally be avoided if at all possible. The Phazon Mines today are virtually empty for the most part, but it has been made more than apparent that the place isn't entirely dead, despite most space-powered forces being driven out there by Galactic Federation soldiers. The machinery that lay inside the facility can still kick on every now and then, and while that might just mean a few powerful turrets impeding one's path, the sighting of the occasional space pirate of some sort means that only those with both powerful armor shielding and highly powered weaponry should ever think of exploring the depths of this facility. As such, what you see is what you get, and as a space pirate stronghold of sorts, this is not a place that tourists should think of getting a good look at outside the main surface quarry if they value their safety. On that same note, the impact crater could be considered a rare threat level Epsilon for its own threat level, if only for the red Phazon that filled it in the past, but given that it's now totally collapsed and inaccessible, it has thankfully been removed as a place where anyone can explore, and for the sake of the galaxy, that is likely for the best.
And now, here we finally are. I thank everyone that has been patient and curious enough to look through the entries here for a traveler's guide to Tallon IV. It has been a genuinely fun and engaging time to research all of this and to provide it to the greater universe that wishes to know more about the planet and its history. However, this is not the end of this series entirely, mind you. After all, there are a lot of different worlds out there to explore and plenty of records still on file for it all. So in our next analysis, we will be leaving Tallon IV and heading to another planet that once had a Leviathan impacted, and with devastating consequences. Get your gear ready, and try and keep your lights down if needed, because we'll next be taking a trip to the planet Aether.
Thank you for reaching the end of this presentation. While we might not always get along, the space pirates and myself, in whatever capacity we can manage, are dedicated to analyzing and examining the life forms of many different worlds, extant and extinct, to show the great variety of life that exists out within the greater cosmos. If you enjoyed this info video and would like to see more, please like, comment, and subscribe for more information. We'll do our best to keep pumping out data so the greater public has an understanding of what to expect when exploring alien planets and their denizens. With that, have a safe journey, and have your bribes prepared beforehand if you happen to come near our territory.